When I first returned to the Reyes household, the place that should have been my home, chaos erupted before I even had the chance to breathe. Isabella Reyes, the girl who had lived under this roof for years, pretending to be me and who had been cherished by everyone as if she were a jewel, suddenly fell down the grand staircase right in front of me. She lay motionless on the floor, her delicate frame sprawled across the polished marble, as if she were the tragic heroine of a play. Gasps filled the air servants, froze in horror, and yet I did not move to comfort her, nor did I allow anyone else to. My father, Antonio Reyes, stormed toward me with fury burning in his eyes. His hand came down across my face with a sting that burned deeper than flesh. He spat out words as cruel as the strike. "How dare you? You have only just come home and already you have pushed your sister down the stairs. If anything happens to her, I will never forgive you." The entire house trembled under his anger, but I refused to cower. My voice was steady, laced with a coldness that startled even myself. "Father, you are a man in your 60s. Have you lived all these years without ever learning to think before you act?" I deliberately knocked over a priceless porcelain vase that shattered across the floor, the sound sharp as a blade splitting the tense air. "Do you not know that moving an injured person recklessly could cause irreversible damage? Yet here you are condemning me without a single thought." The servants exchanged nervous glances, but I stood unmoved. Returning to this family meant facing Isabella, the sister who had stolen my place, and Diego, the reckless twin brother who never bothered to think before speaking. I had no intention of bowing my head or playing the role of the quiet, accommodating daughter. I turned my gaze to Antonio and Lucia Reyes, my parents by blood, who now looked like strangers to me. "There is a saying," I reminded them, my voice steady. "When children fight, the fault lies with the parents." I did not come back here to blend into this family as it is. I came back to change it. The words hit like a stone sinking into water. For a moment, silence weighed heavily across the room. No one dared to respond. No one dared to breathe too loudly. But I had no interest in wasting time on useless arguments. Calmly, I slipped my insulated tumbler back into my bag, looked up at them, and asked almost casually, "Which one is my room?" Confusion flickered across my parents' faces. They hesitated, glancing instinctively toward the second floor, as if the answer was hiding there. I did not wait for their invitation. I pulled my suitcase behind me and walked up the staircase, each step echoing through the tense silence. The family rushed after me, their voices stumbling over one another, leading me toward 2 bedroom doors at the far end of the hall. Antonio's voice was low, unsure, as he muttered, "Take a look, see which one you prefer." My brows furrowed as I turned back to them. Is this some kind of emotional intelligence test? My tone was sharp, my words slicing the air. They blinked clearly, not understanding, so I sighed and turned toward the 2 rooms. One was lavish, designed with elegance, with its own walk-in closet and a private study attached. The other was plain, almost like a sample unit a developer might give away as a promotional gift, barely furnished, devoid of warmth. I let my eyes sweep across both before speaking with calm precision. The choice between the 2 is so obvious that no one with working eyes would struggle with it. Yet the grander room does not seem to have been prepared for me. I stepped into the larger bedroom, letting my fingertips trail along the polished furniture. It was beautiful, but there were traces everywhere that told me someone had already lived here. My gaze settled on the vanity near the window, its surface lined with subtle feminine touches. This had been a young woman's room, and I did not need anyone to tell me whose it was. Slowly, my eyes shifted toward Isabella Reyes, who stood nearby, her eyes glistening with practiced tears. I turned sharply to face my mother, Lucia. "So this room belonged to Isabella, didn't it? If you truly meant to return it to me, you could have cleared it out completely, erased every trace of her, and made it mine again. Instead, you present me with this charade, offering me a smaller, inferior room, and leaving this one drenched in her presence. Am I supposed to pretend not to notice? Or were you hoping I would politely choose the lesser room, sparing her feelings?" The color drained from their faces. Even Diego, who had been loud and combative with me since the moment I stepped foot into the house, was stunned into silence. For once, his voice faltered as he turned to our parents. "Is it true? Did you really plan it this way?" Antonio barked back, his words stumbling. "Nonsense! Do not listen to her!" But the look in his eyes betrayed the unease in his heart. Isabella rushed forward, desperation dripping from her every movement. No, you're wrong. I wanted to give up the room." "It was my decision." She lowered her head, her voice trembling in perfect imitation of sincerity. I wanted my sister to have it. Is that so? A gaze locked onto hers, unwavering. Her lips quivered, her body shifting as if cornered. Finally, in a whisper that could barely be heard, she said yes. But I was not satisfied. And you are sure you will not regret this later? Her eyes shimmered, tears threatening to spill. Her lips pressed tight as though holding back another excuse. Finally, she whispered, I will not regret it. But I cut her off before she could twist the story again, turning instead to Antonio and Lucia. And what about you? As parents, are you certain you agree with Isabella's decision? Are you willing to stand by it completely? The weight of my words hung in the air like a storm about to break. And for the first time, the Reyes family realized I was not the timid daughter they had expected to welcome back. I was the storm itself, and I had no intention of sparing anyone from its path. And if I choose this room, none of you will resent me later, will you? I asked quietly, though my words were sharp as a blade. Antonio and Lucia Reyes, pushed into a corner by the weight of my demand, could do nothing but force a brittle smile and mutter that of course they would not. Good, I said coolly, dragging my suitcase fully inside my tone calm, yet final. From now on, this room is mine. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Every face in the room soured, twisted with barely restrained anger, the air thick with tension that clung like smoke. Isabella could not hold back any longer, her eyes filled with tears until they spilled over, streaking down her cheeks. My mother, Lucia, could not bear to see it. Her voice cracked with emotion as she turned to me. Camila, Isabella has grown up in this room. She is so used to it, perhaps. But I cut her off before she could finish, lifting a shoulder in a casual shrug. My voice steady. I traveled a long way today. If there is nothing else, I would like to rest. There was nothing more they could say. Antonio and Lucia Reyes, along with Isabella, wore expressions as though they had just swallowed glass. Without another word, they left the room, dragging their wounded pride behind them. Only Diego remained standing in the middle of the room, like a misplaced child, his expression vacant, his body stiff as if his brain had frozen mid-thought. I crossed my arms and looked at him, my voice carrying a hint of mockery. Why are you still here? Or are you planning to reclaim the room on behalf of your one and only sister? At that, Isabella, who had nearly reached the doorway, stopped in her tracks. Her eyes lit with desperate hope as she turned back to Diego, silently pleading for him to defend her. But Diego only scratched his head, his vacant gaze darting around. So, that's it. It struck me then that this boy's brain wasn't malicious, just overworked and underpowered like an outdated computer trying to process too much at once. The realization pulled a laugh from me before I could stop it. He mistook it immediately, his face flushed with rage. His body stiffened and he erupted. You wicked woman, I know exactly what you're doing. You're trying to tear apart the bond between me and Isabella. You think she's just pretending to be kind, don't you? Let me tell you, Isabella is nothing like what you imagine. She truly wanted to give you this room. Stop using your filthy thoughts to judge her. I turned my gaze toward Isabella, who stood behind him, her face pale as chalk, even as Diego's words painted her as a saint. She nodded weakly, whispering her agreement, her performance paper thin. Yes, he's right. That was all I needed. I lifted my foot and with the gentlest of nudges pushed Diego out the door, shutting it firmly behind him. Dinner came. As I entered the dining room, the sharp voice of Mateo Reyes, my elder brother, cut through the air. He had rushed home from his work at the family company and now stood at the head of the table, bristling with indignation. Father, Mother, how could you let Isabella give up her room? You know she has lived there since childhood. How is she supposed to sleep anywhere else? He stopped mid-sentence when he saw me. His gaze hardened, his lips curled in disgust. You have barely returned and already you are fighting over a room. Shameless. His accusation sliced through the room like a knife. And all at once, Antonio and Lucia's expressions hardened further, their eyes on me brimming with disappointment and fury, as though I alone had poisoned the peace of their perfect household. Only Diego tried in his clumsy way to explain. Brother, the room. Isabella gave it up willingly. The words stumbled out of him, but they were enough to freeze Mateo in his tracks. His anger faltered, choked back by the sudden contradiction. Isabella, sensing the moment slipping quickly, stepped forward, tugging gently at Mateo's sleeve, her voice soft and tremulous. Please don't say any more. Everything belonged to Camila to begin with. Her words might have sounded generous, but her face betrayed her. Every line of her delicate features radiated wounded injustice. as if she had been forced to endure something unbearable. Mateo saw only the image she wanted him to see. His jaw tightened. His hand came down to comfort hers, his tone dripping with protective anger as he turned back to me. Isabella gave up the room out of kindness, but you should learn to be more considerate. She is not used to sleeping in another room. After dinner, it would be best for you to move out and take the smaller one. I did not even bother looking at him. My eyes moved instead to Antonio and Lucia. Do the two of you agree with him? My father's lips pressed into a thin line. He said nothing. My mother faltered, guilt clouding her eyes before she finally spoke, her tone coaxing Camila. Your brother is right. Isabella has grown up in that room. It will be hard for her to sleep anywhere else. I pulled out a chair and sat, my movements calm, my voice steady as I answered. I will not switch rooms. Furthermore, Mateo's words are meaningless. He accuses me, yet he has no proof. My hand slipped into my pocket, retrieving a small recorder. I placed it on the table and pressed play. At once, the dining room was filled with the sound of the afternoon's conversation. Every word of hesitation, every forced agreement, every manipulation spilled into the silence. The room grew cold as their own voices condemned them. When the recording ended, Mateo's fury had vanished, replaced by stiff silence. His self-righteous anger had been stripped bare. I looked directly at him, my expression calm, my words cutting clear. I am 16 years old. If Isabella and I were switched as children, then our birthdays must fall only days apart. The table fell silent, the weight of truth pressing down on every corner of the Reyes household. According to the law, anyone at 16 who earns their own income already holds full civil capacity. Before I moved into that room, I had confirmed 3 times with Isabella that it was truly her choice, and each time she affirmed it herself. That was the only reason I decided to stay, so I don't believe I have done anything wrong in this matter. Yet Mateo refused to let go, his voice sharp with accusation. Can't you see that Isabella was uncomfortable? Obviously she was just. I cut him off, my words slicing through his pretense. Just what? Just trying to manipulate the family's sympathy, just seeking to ease her own guilt by playing the role of a martyr? Or perhaps just pressured by the weight of her false identity and desperate to appear perfect. Whatever the reason, people must bear the consequences of their words. I turned my gaze on Isabella, meeting her eyes without blinking. Isn't that right, little sister? Then I faced Mateo again, my tone cold and deliberate. And you, my dear brother. I don't know if you have ever bothered to learn about me, but I have taken the time to learn about you. You excelled in your studies from a young age. Even before graduation, you were already involved in key projects for the Reyes construction group. So don't insult my intelligence by pretending you can't see the truth. I shifted my eyes to Diego, who still lingered nearby with his vacant expression, as though his brain was too overloaded to keep up. Whether you are acting out of misplaced worry for Isabella, or simply choosing to favor her to make me look unreasonable, I think you owe me an apology. Because no matter what you think of me, accusing me without basis of stealing Isabella's room was nothing but falsehood. My words struck Mateo hard. His face tightened, his confidence faltered, and the color drained from his expression. Lucia quickly intervened with a brittle laugh. Her tone rushed Camila. Your brother just misunderstood the situation. An apology isn't necessary. Let it go, all right? I remained silent, letting my gaze linger on Mateo, my eyes pressing him to answer. The tension mounted until Antonio could not bear it anymore. His palm slammed against the table, his deep voice reverberating like thunder. Enough. You return home and immediately turn this house into chaos. Can we not have a moment of peace? Must you drag this family into disorder? The room collapsed into silence. Isabella lowered her head in practiced meekness. Diego shrank into himself, his body folded like a child caught misbehaving, and not a word left their lips. I was the only one who exhaled disappointment flickering in my eyes. Quietly, I picked up the recorder from the table, slipped it into my pocket, then rose and walked upstairs to gather my belongings. When I returned with my suitcase and headed for the door, Lucia rushed forward, her hand tightening desperately on the handle of my luggage. Her voice trembled between reproach and fear. It's dark already. You have no one else but this family. Where are you going to go to walk away over something so small? Is it really worth it? I turned to her, my voice steady, each word a stone that could not be moved. Worth it. Memories sharp and merciless surged through me. When I was a child, my birth mother, unmarried and frightened, had no means to raise me. After the mistaken switch with Isabella, she abandoned me at a scrapyard without hesitation. I was raised by my grandmother, a woman who scavenged for survival until she died, when I was only in 7th grade. From then on, I had only myself. I longed for family, yes, but that never blinded me to reality. I grew up in poverty, taught early that the only person in this world who could love me, protect me, and bear responsibility for my life was myself. My voice did not waver as I continued. I told you the moment I stepped into this house, when children turn against each other, the fault lies with the parents. You may favor the child you raise, that is your right. But as parents, you are also responsible for maintaining the barest sense of fairness. And yet it is plain to see you cannot do it. I will face this again and again in the future, I said, my eyes locked on theirs unflinching. I will be forced to endure injustice no matter how clear my reasoning may be. When you found me, you already knew my academic record. You knew that I earned merit scholarships that covered my tuition and boarding fees. You knew I could repair computers, that I built a following of more than 200,000 online. I do not need this family to survive. I can support myself and attend a top university without a cent from you. I came back because I wanted to believe in family and blood ties. But if all I will ever receive here is biased disrespect and the absence of even the simplest fairness, then why should I stay? My hand tore the suitcase handle free from my mother's grasp. Without a single glance backward, I stepped through the door and out into the night. It was nearly impossible to catch a taxi around the gated estates, so I had no choice but to take my bike and rely on the map on my phone to guide me. I had no idea how far I had gone, when suddenly a black sedan pulled up across the road, blocking my path. My instincts kicked in. I tightened my grip on the handlebars and backed up, ready to slip away. But then the door opened and Antonio Reyes stepped out with Mateo right behind him. Antonio positioned himself directly in front of me, silent at first, his eyes heavy with something between weariness and regret. For a long moment, he only looked at me as though searching for something he couldn't find. Finally, he sighed a sound that felt like surrender and turned to Mateo. "Apologize to your sister." The words came out measured but firm. Mateo's jaw clenched. He didn't want to. Every line of his body screamed resistance. Still, he muttered out a begrudging apology. I didn't answer him. Instead, I slipped my phone from my pocket, raised it discreetly, and recorded the entire moment, saving his reluctant words as evidence. I wasn't about to let the Reyes family twist the truth again. If they tried, I'd have proof to force them to face it. When I finally returned to the estate, Isabella stood waiting. Her expression was dark and tight, her gaze sharpened to daggers, but she didn't dare say a word. She could only watch me drag my suitcase back into the room, spread her floral blanket across her ridiculous princess bed, and settle back in. Her silence was brittle, and I could see how hard her teeth pressed against each other, as if she could grind her fury into dust. By the next morning, the cracks in the family were obvious. Mateo had left during the night, likely to avoid seeing me. Isabella appeared at breakfast with swollen eyes rimmed red, her dark circles bruising her pale face. She had clearly cried herself into exhaustion. Lucia fussed over her, distressed beyond reason, until finally she couldn't hold back. "Camila, if you like the way Isabella's room was decorated, there's another one on the 3rd floor. We can remodel it for you. Why don't you move there instead?" Her voice was too sweet, too pleading, as though she were offering a compromise that would heal everything. I finished the last bite of my sandwich, swallowed, and looked at her steadily. No. That single word hung in the air, flat and absolute. Then I carefully folded the remaining sandwich into a small plastic bag, poured the leftover milk into my travel mug, and gathered my tools by my chair. Standing, I inclined my head politely to both Antonio and Lucia. "Mom, Dad, I'm finished. I have work to do today, so I'll excuse myself." My sudden politeness caught them off guard. They froze, confused by my calm formality. I was nearly at the door when Lucia's voice broke behind me, almost desperate. "Camila, tell us what you really want." I checked the time on my watch before turning back, my voice cool, my gaze steady. "From the beginning, you could have treated me exactly as you treated Isabella. If there had been fairness from the start, there would have been no need for anyone to fight for space. It was your favoritism that created all of this. Children who are starved of love claw for every scrap of affection they can get. Children who are indulged cling desperately to their privileges, terrified of losing them. That's why we compete. That's why we fight. That's why we are forced to keep proving who is loved." I didn't wait for her reply. I headed straight to the garage. The Reyes family's underground lot was lined with gleaming luxury cars, each one worth more than everything I had ever owned combined. But I walked past them all and reached for my bike. The irony wasn't lost on me, all their extravagance yet. I preferred my scratched handlebars and worn-out pedals. I rode out of that place without looking back. Nearly 40 minutes later, I reached the gates of the City Institute, a sprawling university complex. I parked my bike and made a quick call to a client when I noticed movement at the edge of my vision. Diego. He had followed me. My twin brother with the same face, the same features, but a mind that never seemed to keep up. When I spotted him, he looked startled, guilty, even as though he had been caught stealing. But he straightened, trying to recover. "Camila, you just got back home. Why run off so soon? Why not spend time with Mom and Dad?" His voice was unsure, almost childlike. We were twins, mirror images in a way, and that likeness made his questions cut sharper. We looked more like each other than I ever looked like Mateo or even Isabella, and yet it was precisely that resemblance that made his simplicity so unbearable. I rolled my eyes, mocking him with exaggerated arrogance. "I'm better than you, Diego. You came here to spy, but I came here to work, to earn." My tone dripped with sarcasm, echoing the way I had once heard an actor sneer in a movie. Then my eyes caught someone else, a girl standing near the campus gates. She wore a white down jacket, phone in hand, her long hair falling gracefully around her shoulders. Immediately I softened my expression, my smile blossoming as if the morning sun had broken through clouds. I waved energetically. "Beautiful lady over here." Diego blinked in surprise at the sudden shift, but I didn't care. He had always had his looks working in his favor. Girls noticed him wherever he went. Even walking through the streets earlier, I had seen their lingering stares, their amused whispers, but he had never known how to use it. I had thought about sending him away, letting him fend for himself outside. Yet when my client realized he was my twin, her interest sharpened. She insisted on inviting both of us into her dorm, and so I found myself leading him forward. My polite mask firmly in place, my mind calculating. If they wanted to see us as a pair, so be it. I would make it work. Because unlike Isabella, unlike Mateo, unlike even my own parents, Diego was not my rival. He was my mirror, for better or worse. And maybe, just maybe, I could turn even his shadow into something that kept me moving forward. Since the university had already gone into winter break, the dorms were nearly empty. Only the girl who had contacted me was still there. She welcomed me warmly, brewing 2 cups of hot drinks, one for me and one for Diego, who still insisted on tagging along. I didn't comment, simply set my bag down and pulled out the old action camera I had salvaged from a junkyard. Then I got to work dismantling the discounted computer parts she had purchased, my fingers moving quickly and carefully. As I worked, I spoke with her, casually recording short clips for my next video. Most people didn't know this side of me, but I wasn't just Camila Reyes, the unwanted daughter of a wealthy family. I was also a small-time blogger, someone who had learned to survive through grit and stubbornness. After my grandmother passed away, I had needed to support myself. I had scavenged scrap electronics, taken under-the-table jobs at factories, even washed dishes in greasy kitchens just to make ends meet. Back in my neighborhood, there was a couple, the Cordobas, who owned a little secondhand computer shop. They took pity on me and let me help sort through the piles of old electronics they bought from junk dealers. Every time I found a part worth saving, they would give me a small cut of the profit. Over time, I picked up the basics of building and repairing computers. What had started as survival turned into a skill, then a passion. By the time I got into the top high school in my county, I had less time to take on jobs, but I kept assembling computers on weekends. I started filming this process, uploading the videos, and somehow it stuck. People began to watch. It wasn't much, but it was mine. That girl today was a fan, one who had saved her newly bought parts, just so I could be the one to assemble them. When the computer was finished, she sent me $100 through her phone, her eyes bright with excitement as she congratulated me for finding my family again. She said she couldn't wait for my next upload. I accepted the payment with genuine gratitude, feeling for the first time in a while that maybe someone out there actually believed in me. I thanked her and left with a smile that stayed with me until I reached the campus gates. Outside, Diego was waiting. His face was tight, conflicted, as if he had been rehearsing words all this time. Finally, he blurted them out. "You biked more than 10 miles just to earn $100. I shot him a sharp look. "It's none of your business." My irritation rose quickly, especially as his earlier words replayed in my head. No matter who you think you are, I only recognize Isabella as my sister. That sting hadn't faded, and I wasn't about to forget it now. It was almost noon. I dropped onto the edge of a flower bed near the gates, pulled out the thermos of milk and the sandwich I had wrapped up from breakfast, and prepared to eat. Diego stared at me dumbfounded. "Don't tell me you brought that just to save money on lunch. Are you really that stingy?" Before I could answer, his stomach growled so loudly it drowned his words. He froze his ears, turning red. I bit back a laugh. With a sigh, I broke the sandwich clean in half. His eyes lit up, hand already reaching out, expecting me to share. But instead, I shoved both halves into my own mouth, chewing deliberately. The look on his face, stunned, embarrassed, almost betrayed, was priceless. I never allowed myself to go hungry. That was one rule I lived by. I wasn't foolish enough to sacrifice my own comfort just to appease someone else. Diego must have realized it too, because his expression quickly soured. But I didn't care. I finished my food, stood, and dusted off my hands, already thinking about the next client waiting for me. As I turned to leave, Diego grabbed my arm. "Where are you going now?" I held up my phone, showing the map with the next address. "There. Now let go unless you want to waste my time." He leaned in, scanning the screen, his eyes widening. "That's over 13 miles from here. You're planning to ride that rusty bike of yours all the way there and back?" "Yes," I replied simply. "And again, it's not your concern." He looked frustrated, helpless even, but I kept my tone flat and dismissive. For someone who shared my face, Diego couldn't have been more different from me. He had grown up cushioned, sheltered, never having to fight for scraps. And now he couldn't understand why I would willingly push myself so hard for something so small. Finally, with a huff, he pulled out his phone and called a driver who had been waiting nearby. "Load her bike into the trunk," he told the man, then turned to me. "Get in, I'll take you." I considered refusing just to prove a point, but the winter air was biting and time was money, so I let go of my backpack, slid into the back seat, and leaned casually against the leather. My voice was calm but sharp as a blade. "Let's get one thing clear. Even if you drive me everywhere, I'm not giving Isabella her room back." His mouth opened, but no words came out. I pressed on, smirking. "And don't even try denying it. You followed me today for one reason only, to help her reclaim what she thinks is hers." His silence said everything. For all his protests, Diego had always been Isabella's shield. But I had survived too much to be intimidated by loyalty built on lies. I even mimicked his tone on purpose. Mocking him with his own words, "I only recognize Isabella as my sister." The effect was immediate. Diego's lips tightened, his face pale with frustration, yet he couldn't come up with a single retort. After a long silence, he muttered clumsily, "Isabella's been used to that room since she was little. If she changes rooms, she really can't sleep." I gave him a lazy, cutting smile. "Then she shouldn't have pretended to be generous by offering it to me in the first place. You know what her problem is? She thinks her room is some kind of royal chamber that requires a grand performance, 3 refusals, 3 acceptances before it can be bestowed. The old saying still stands, those who fake generosity end up choking on it. She met me, and that's her bad luck." The words were sharp enough to leave him speechless. Diego pressed his lips together and looked away, the argument drained out of him. I didn't bother to continue. My next appointment was waiting, and money mattered more than his sulking. When the door opened at the new client's house, I was taken aback. Instead of a middle-aged couple, a towering man with arms covered in tattoos filled the doorway. He wore nothing but a t-shirt in the dead of winter, thick gold chains glinting at his neck. Just one glance told me he wasn't someone to take lightly. Even Diego stiffened beside me, startled. On instinct, he reached back and pulled me behind him, placing his body between mine and the stranger's. For a second, I froze, surprised at the sight of his broad back shielding me. A strange, confusing flicker stirred in my chest, an unfamiliar warmth tangled with irritation. Thankfully, a kind-faced woman appeared from inside the house, touching the man's arm with gentle reproach. "Look at you scaring the kids," she said softly, then turned to me with a smile. "Don't be afraid, sweetheart. He only looks intimidating. It's freezing outside, come in quickly." She was the real client, the one who had ordered the setup for her daughter's studies after watching one of my videos. She had once told me through messages that she felt sorry for me seeing a girl her daughter's age hustling just to survive had struck her deeply. Now she welcomed me as though I were family. I assembled the computer swiftly and efficiently, my hands steady from years of practice. When I was done, she insisted I and Diego stay for dinner. I politely declined, knowing the long road back awaited me. She didn't push, but she slipped me extra money along with the installation fee, pressing it into my hands until I had no choice but to accept. By the time we left, I had earned $300 that day, and my spirits soared. Yet Diego's expression on the ride back was unreadable, heavier than before. At last his voice broke the silence. "You used to make a living like this." I glanced at him unbothered. "Building computers is a blessing compared to scavenging trash, scrubbing dishes, or breaking my back in sweatshop factories. And now, thanks to people who watch my videos, I can take these jobs every week." He frowned, recalling perhaps the moment earlier when the tattooed man had opened the door. "Have you ever been in danger before?" I hesitated, then shrugged as though it didn't matter. Sometimes. For a while he said nothing. Then quietly, almost hesitantly, he whispered, "I'm sorry." The words hit me harder than I expected. Apologies weren't something I was used to. I had learned to brace myself for hardship, malice, disdain, those I could handle. But a genuine apology. That left me fumbling. I forced a crooked smile, brushing the moment aside. "It's really not a big deal. I know how to protect myself." To prove my point, I pulled a stun baton out of my backpack and waved it playfully in front of his eyes. "See this, a pig prod. Works on people just as well as on livestock." My laugh was half a joke, half a warning. Back when I first started streaming, a creep had pretended to be a fan and placed an order just to lure me out. He tried something disgusting, but luckily, I had been live at the time. My viewers immediately called the police, saving me. After that, they begged me to carry protection, so I bought this baton. Since then, I had established a routine. Before taking a job, I video called the customer to confirm the parts were real. I posted online when I left and only posted again once I was safely home. It was my way of ensuring nothing could catch me off guard again. Diego watched me closely as I explained, his brows furrowed in a way I couldn't quite read. For once, he didn't argue. For once, he seemed to see me not just as the girl who had stolen his sister's place, but as someone who had fought for every scrap of her own survival. To avoid ever being attacked and having someone use my fingerprint or face to unlock my phone, I had long ago disabled every biometric feature and left only the password option. Diego had never realized how hard my life had been. Until that moment, and when I explained it to him, I could see the color drain from his face. He looked unsettled, ashamed, as if everything he thought he knew about me had been turned upside down. After a long silence, his voice broke softly, almost a whisper. "At least now you're home. You don't need to make life so hard for yourself anymore." The faint smile on my lips faded, and I turned my gaze to the window, watching the streets and buildings rush past as the car moved. "Enough," I said quietly. "At least I can support myself now. Even if I'm thrown out, I'm not afraid of surviving. You're the biological daughter of our parents." Diego pushed back immediately, his tone firm. "Who would dare throw you out?" I didn't argue. My eyes slid shut, my tone flat. What kind of family welcomes their daughter back only to prepare nothing but a guest room for her? My words silenced him. He said nothing more for several minutes, until finally he whispered again, so soft I almost didn't hear it. "I'm sorry." From then until we reached home, neither of us said another word. The moment we stepped inside, Isabella darted toward Diego, tugging on his sleeve, her wide eyes fixed directly on me. "Diego. She agreed to give me back my room, didn't she?" Her voice wasn't loud, but perfectly pitched so everyone in the living room could hear. Antonio and Lucia sat on the sofa. Their brows furrowed, but they didn't speak, didn't intervene. Even if they sensed the unfairness of it, their silence betrayed the truth. They still loved and favored Isabella more. The bitter taste of disappointment curled in my chest, and for a split second I regretted ever coming back with my father. But this time Diego stood beside me. "Isabella," he said firmly, "you were the one who offered to give up your room. Once you say something, you have to be responsible for it. Don't act like this." He couldn't bring himself to speak too harshly, after all they had grown up together. But Isabella could not accept the shift. Her eyes glistened with tears as she whispered his name like a wounded child. "Diego." For a heartbeat he faltered, swayed by her familiar fragility. But in the end, he gritted his teeth and pressed on. "The room on the 3rd floor has the exact same layout as hers. If she prefers her old space, We can have it renovated the way she wants." His words loosened my clenched fist, and I forced myself to remain composed. With a polite tone, as if nothing had happened, I turned toward my parents. "Dad, Mom, I'll head upstairs to rest." And without waiting for a response, I climbed the stairs, a lightness in my chest that hadn't been there before. The next morning, the interior designer that Lucia had hired arrived. I had just finished editing a video for the week and stepped out to stretch. Leaning against the doorframe, I saw workers rushing about decorating and arranging Isabella's room under my mother's constant instructions. From the landing, Lucia stood pointing at fabrics and paint, describing Isabella's preferences with fervent care. I closed my door quietly, shutting out the sight, and sat back at my desk. Right now, I was a junior in high school, standing at one of the most important crossroads of my life. I had no intention of wasting my energy fighting for scraps of affection or trying to prove myself in a battle I could never win. That entire day, I buried myself in study, emerging only before dinner. The moment I opened my door, Isabella was there, pacing outside, as though she had been waiting all day. Her smile was triumphant when her eyes met mine. She stepped close, leaned in, and whispered, "Camila, don't think that taking my room means you can take my place in our parents' hearts. Look around. When you came home, they didn't even prepare a room for you. But when I was left without one, they immediately remodeled another better than the first." Her words were meant to sting, but I only gave her a calm, mocking smile. "First, it wasn't stealing. Everything you have in this house was taken because you stole my place to begin with. Second, don't tell me you really waited outside my room all day just to say this." My voice sharpened as I added with a cold edge, "If you've got that much free time, Isabella, maybe you should book an appointment at the hospital. Get your head checked." After throwing the last sharp words at Isabella, I left her standing there seething with rage and headed downstairs for dinner. The atmosphere at the dining table was calm at first, until my mother suddenly turned to me. "Camila," she said in her soft yet deliberate voice, "since your household registration has been transferred back here, your father and I would like you to attend St. Augustine Academy with Isabella." What do you think? St. Augustine was the most prestigious private high school in Los Angeles, known for its wealth, exclusivity, and old money heritage. I hesitated for a moment, then shook my head. "That's not necessary. I can attend a public school. USC High is already excellent." No, my father Antonio immediately rejected the idea. USC High may be good, but St. Augustine is no less. More importantly, as the daughter of the Reyes family, you must learn to integrate with the social class you belong to. He paused, watching me carefully before continuing. "I know you are independent, Camila, but you need to understand this. Once you step into society, ability alone is not enough. Relationships matter more than you think. Why do you believe that even those from poor families who manage to test into elite universities still find it difficult to climb into the upper class? It is not because they lack talent. It is because the environment they grew up in has limited their access." I listened quietly, then nodded with composure. I understand. And truthfully, he was not wrong. If one day I wanted to start a business or build my own empire, relationships would be essential. Still, I wasn't willing to go without conditions. I straightened my back, meeting his gaze head on. "If I am to attend St. Augustine, I have one request." "Speak." Antonio said, his brows lifting slightly. "Make my true identity public. Announce who I am in front of Isabella." For a moment, my father faltered. I leaned forward, my voice steady but firm. "Yes, my grades are strong, but St. Augustine isn't a place where academics alone carry weight. For 16 years, I never received the kind of elite training their students have. I don't ride horses. I don't know how to arrange flowers. I can't casually discuss art appraisal or wine tasting. All the things they take for granted, I lack. That already makes me an outsider, and if I enter with some vague, uncertain identity, I'll be marked excluded and likely bullied. I refuse to waste time fighting meaningless battles. I need a position where even if they don't like me, they'll have no choice but to respect me." When I finished, Antonio's eyes glimmered with approval. For the first time that night, he smiled at me as if seeing me anew. "Good, we'll do it your way." Across the table, Isabella stiffened, her lips trembling as though she might protest, but she didn't dare. She only put on that practiced expression of hurt innocence, her gaze pleading with my father. Lucia quickly joined in, her tone laced with concern. "Antonio, if you reveal the truth about Camila and Isabella being switched at birth, I'm afraid Isabella will face enormous pressure at school. My father looked from Isabella to me, clearly wavering, perhaps regretting how quickly he had agreed. Seizing the moment, my mother pressed further. Camila, why not tell people you and Isabella are still biological sisters, that you're twins? I laughed softly, my voice edged with irony. So tomorrow you want me to announce that Isabella, Diego, and I are triplets. Does that sound believable to you, Mother? My eyes met hers coldly, and I watched the confidence drain from her face. Enough. Antonio's voice cut through the tension, decisive and sharp. At the opening ceremony, I will donate a full set of advanced learning equipment in Isabella's name. That way, everyone will understand that she is still cherished and valued in this family. No one will dare whisper otherwise. Isabella realized that the decision had been made, and though she forced herself to say, "Thank you, Father," her eyes flickered with pure resentment when they met mine, but I no longer cared. At that moment, I finally understood something about the wealthy problems that seem insurmountable can be solved with astonishing ease. A crisis that once felt like a wall closing in could be swept aside with a single extravagant donation worth millions. A gesture that could simultaneously affirm me as the true daughter while preserving Isabella's dignity as though nothing had changed. The irony of it struck deep. Memories of my grandmother flooded back, how she had hidden her illness so I could continue my studies, only seeking treatment when it was far too late. Memories of poor families sacrificing their children's futures because they could not afford the cost of education. The injustice of it burned in my chest. In that instant, I swore to myself, I will succeed. I will rise higher than anyone expects. I will make sure that neither I nor the people I love will ever be trapped in the same desperate circumstances again. After dinner, I returned to my room and pulled out the 12th grade textbooks I had already studied through online courses. I read them carefully, revisiting all the critical concepts and preparing myself for what lay ahead. The following days fell into a steady rhythm. Most of my time was spent in my room, buried in study, or outside taking small jobs, assembling computers, to make some money of my own. During this period, Isabella barely saw me at all. Even when she tried to find me eager to flaunt some new designer furniture custom ordered for her bedroom, or the expensive dresses our mother had bought her, she could never reach me. I avoided her as if she were just background noise. Diego, on the other hand, always sought out my company. The moment I so much as stepped outside, he was right at my side. When Lunar New Year came around and I went back to visit my grandmother's grave, he insisted on joining me. He said he wanted to see the place where I had lived, and he said it with such pride, reminding me, after all, we're twins. Since when had that phrase become his favorite? He often joked that in some ways, I was just the female version of him, while he was the version of me who hadn't been switched at birth. Every time he said it, I gave him a look of pure exasperation, waved his midterm report card in front of him, then dragged him to eat noodles at Lanchu's little shop, the simple noodle soup I used to love. $6 a bowl with 2 vegetable toppings of your choice. The kind-hearted woman who ran the shop always gave me an extra portion of noodles, without charging, sometimes even slipping a boiled egg under the broth. Afterward, I took Diego to my old middle school. I sought out my homeroom teacher and handed over $200,000 I had received from Antonio to donate to the school. Years ago, when my grandmother passed away, that very teacher, along with other faculty members, had helped me cover the funeral arrangements. Later, when I had been accepted into high school, she even reached out to an old friend to secure a tuition reduction for me. Then I took Diego to visit Mr. Cardenas, the man who had once given me part-time work and a place to learn skills that shaped who I became. We shared a meal with childhood friends I hadn't seen in years. Inside his shop, Diego finally understood the oddity of the computers I once worked on, the ones cobbled together from discarded parts, the same kind of machine I had once used to edit videos. Watching me interact naturally with these people, laughing and reminiscing as though no time had passed, I caught a flash of something in Diego's eyes, envy sharp and undeniable. When it was time to head back, Mr. Cardenas drove us to the train station in his battered old van. Even there, his wife couldn't help but tell Diego stories about my past. The time I had confronted an abusive employer, or when I led my classmates and even the police to rescue a girl who was being forced by her family to drop out of school in exchange for a marriage arrangement. Diego listened, his expression complicated, as though piecing together a version of me he had never known. On New Year's Eve, both Isabella and I were dressed in gowns custom designed by Lucia, but while mine was simple elegance, hers came with more a sapphire necklace worth over $1 million specially commissioned for her. As if that weren't enough, my cousin gifted her a luxury sports car, despite the fact that she wasn't even old enough for a license yet. All of it, I knew, was meant to reinforce her position, to give her pride in a house where my return was about to shift everything. Because that night, Antonio would publicly acknowledge me as his daughter in front of all our extended family and friends. Isabella's glittering gifts were nothing but tools to secure her image in their eyes. She strutted with smug confidence, stopping by my side. Now and then, to boast certain I would never dare to retaliate on such a significant evening. She thought my silence was fear that I would protect the family's face at the expense of my own pride. I let her bask in it. When she was most radiant with her false sense of triumph, I quietly slid my phone from my pocket, letting her glimpse a recording saved there before I turned away and walked into Antonio's study. Minutes later, we emerged together, and my father announced before the entire gathering that he was gifting me a villa worth $5 million under his name as a welcome home gift. The smile on Isabella's face froze instantly, as though carved in stone. Not long after, Diego tugged me down to the basement, his eyes alight with anticipation. "I have a New Year's gift for you," he said. Beside my old worn-out bicycle stood a brand-new pink electric scooter, already licensed and ready to ride. It came with a phone holder, a windscreen in matching pink, and next to it a box with a brand-new laptop inside an RTX 4090 system, cutting-edge, fast, powerful. It wasn't a sapphire necklace nor a sports car, but it was priceless to me because I knew exactly what it cost. This wasn't Antonio's money, nor a bribe from Lucia, nor hush gifts to silence whispers. This was Diego's own hard-earned effort, the result of my videos, my skills, my world. And that made it mean more than anything else. "Don't get too sentimental," Diego said with mock pride, his eyes shining with mischief. After he discovered I had been making videos to earn money, he launched a channel of his own called Following My Sister Into Work. With his bright looks, the privilege of being a rich family's heir, and that blend of adorable cluelessness mixed with curiosity about labor, his account quickly attracted a flood of followers. "Camila, why are you crying?" he asked softly, when he caught the redness in my eyes. "Nonsense," I muttered, sniffing quickly before shoving a helmet onto his head. "Get on, I'll take you for a ride." We sped around the neighborhood on my scooter, the winter wind biting into our skin until both of us were frozen stiff. By the time we returned, our faces were flushed and our hands numb. "All right, I admit it," Diego laughed, rubbing his palms together. "In winter, we should probably just let the driver handle it." Then he glanced over at me, noticing that I was also rubbing my hands. For a moment he stared, then burst into laughter. "I just realized you and I share so many little habits. No doubt about it, we really are twins." I laughed with him. "Oh, please. Even if I took a math exam with my toes, I'd never get a 56 like you did. That's only because I wasn't taking it seriously," he declared with boundless confidence. "Just wait. Next term, I'll prove to you what I can really do." "I'll be waiting," I teased back. We were still laughing as we climbed the stairs from the garage, but the mood shifted when we ran into Isabella. She gave us a cold-cutting look before turning sharply and walking away. Diego glanced at me with guilt flickering in his expression. "I should go talk to her," he said. "Go," I nodded, understanding. They had grown up together. I couldn't begrudge him for that. Sure enough, before long, he managed to coax her back into smiles and laughter, as though nothing had happened. After the new year, I transferred into Ninghua Academy. Thanks to my high entrance exam scores, I was placed directly into the top accelerated class, instead of the international program where Diego and Isabella studied. With the Reyes name now officially mine, it was easy enough to blend into the elite circles. Though I caught the occasional glance of disdain from those who noticed the faint traces of hardship still etched into me outwardly, everyone remained polite, refined, almost too careful. During this time, Isabella didn't provoke me directly. Instead, she maintained a facade of warmth whenever others were watching. She wasn't stupid. At home, she could mock me with her thinly veiled words because she knew the family would still favor her. But outside, any slip, any public quarrel could tarnish the Reyes' reputation. Having been raised in this rarefied world, she understood better than anyone that the children of the elite might be lazy at their studies, but in social maneuvering, they were anything but naive. They were seasoned, calculating, far too shrewd to be her pawns. And yet that delicate balance was broken the moment he arrived. One afternoon during the lunch break, I was quietly reviewing my French notes, when a tall, striking young man appeared beside my desk. His voice was smooth, unhesitating, the kind of tone used to announce facts rather than start conversations. "I heard you're the real daughter of the Reyes family," he said. "That would make you my true fiancé." His name was Nathaniel Whitmore, heir to the Whitmore fortune. From the second his presence entered my world, Isabella's eyes on me began to change. Later that evening, after finishing my homework, I stepped outside for a walk, wanting to breathe and clear my head. Halfway down the staircase, I saw her waiting. Isabella stood there, her face shadowed, her eyes sharp and unyielding. Something in the air around her felt heavy, dangerous. I instinctively slowed, ready to retreat to my room, but she moved first. She seized my wrist, her grip fierce, her voice low and venomous. "You'll never defeat me, Camila." Then in the very next heartbeat, her tone changed loud enough to echo through the halls. "Sister, don't," and before I could react, she flung herself backward, tumbling down the stairs with a theatrical scream. For the briefest instant, I caught the triumphant smile that flickered across her lips as her body twisted mid-fall. My blood turned to ice, but I also lifted my gaze, immediately, to the small camera fixed above the stairwell, something I had installed days ago, right outside my door. My fingers brushed against the old action cam, running silently in my jacket pocket, and I felt the steady weight of my phone in my jeans, still recording audio. I had known she would try something. I had prepared. Even so, watching her body crash against the steps, hearing the thud of her landing, my scalp tingled and my breath caught in my chest. The malice behind her act was beyond anything I had calculated. The chill that swept over me was sharp, electric, crawling down my spine. And yet beneath that cold terror, a harder truth crystallized inside me. This time, Isabella would not win. I rushed down the staircase just as Antonio and Lucia appeared, alarmed by the sound of the fall. The sight of Isabella sprawled unconscious on the floor drew a piercing scream from Lucia, who lunged forward to cradle her, but I instinctively stopped her. Before I could explain, a heavy slap from Antonio snapped my head to the side, my cheek instantly burning with pain and humiliation. A dull roar filled my ears, drowning out the rest of the world, but his furious words still cut through like glass. "You are vicious beyond forgiveness. I cannot accept a daughter like you. If anything happens to Isabella, I swear I will never let this go." His voice blended with the ringing in my skull until rage surged up hotter than the sting on my face. I drew a sharp breath, steadied myself, then deliberately brought my hand down on a porcelain vase beside me, shattering it into fragments that skittered across the floor. "You've lived half your lives already," I said, my voice trembling but resolute, "and yet you cannot ask before you strike. Do you not know that moving someone who may have spinal injuries without care can cripple them forever?" The words hung in the air, sharper than the shards at our feet, and they froze in their anger. When I saw the first flicker of reason return to their eyes, I turned toward the stunned servants who stood watching in shock. "Call emergency," I ordered firmly. "Report clearly that the patient is unconscious, and ask what must be done before the ambulance arrives." When I faced Antonio and Lucia again, my tone had shifted to cold certainty. I did not push Isabella. "If you doubt me, call the police. There is a camera outside my door. There is a camera on my chest. There is audio recording in my pocket. The truth will not be bent to your accusations." For a moment, silence stretched heavy between us, but I pressed on my words, as calm as they were cutting. "Instead of blaming me, ask yourselves what you have taught her. What kind of daughter throws herself down a staircase just to win affection hours later at the hospital?" Isabella was rushed into surgery. I sat apart from Antonio and Lucia, the cold steel of the waiting room chair pressing into my back. My eyes locked on the red glow above the operating room door. Inside me, emotions warred violently. The switch at birth had not been my fault, but it had stolen everything. My mother had abandoned me, yes, but had she taken Isabella instead, she would have abandoned her too. And still, it was Isabella who had been cherished, Isabella who had taken my place. Isabella who had lived the life that was meant for me. Watching her body carried past me pale and limp, I felt both fury and pity. She was a dancer, a student of the arts. What twisted desperation drove her to injure herself so recklessly, just to cling to love that was never hers? My thoughts spun in a storm until Diego appeared, his hand warm as he tugged at mine. "Come on, let me get you checked." I blinked at him, confused. The muffled ringing in my ears had swallowed half his words. He leaned closer, speaking directly into the ear that still heard. "You've been raising your voice without noticing. I think your hearing's damaged." The surgery would last hours, he explained, so he guided me to another department, insisting I be seen. The diagnosis was swift and merciless. My eardrum had ruptured from the force of Antonio's blow. When Diego relayed the results to our parents, Antonio only stood frozen, stunned for a moment. Lucia's face softened briefly, guilt flickering in her expression, but before she could speak, the surgical light above the operating room flicked off. Isabella was wheeled out pale but alive, and Lucia instantly turned all her attention to her, rushing to her side. Antonio only sighed weary and told Diego to take me home to rest. I collapsed into sleep, but at 3 a.m, the door to my room burst open. Rough hands yanked me out of bed and pure instinct took hold. I screamed, reaching under my pillow for the taser I had hidden, and drove it hard into the intruder's side. A sharp cry of pain split the night as his body convulsed and crumpled to the floor. Diego arrived seconds later, flipping the lights on, and our shock was mirrored when we saw the face of the man groaning on the ground, Mateo, the brother who was supposed to be away on a project in another city. Understanding the danger, Diego wasted no time. He called for a driver and rushed Mateo to the hospital. By midday, he sent me the message Isabella had survived the night and was out of immediate danger, and Mateo would recover as well. "Don't worry," he wrote, his words meant to soothe me. But I could not let it go. Anxiety churned inside me until I made up my mind. I would go to the hospital myself. I rode my electric scooter through the city streets, the chill of the wind biting my skin, my mind heavy with questions I could no longer ignore. When I reached the ward where Isabella was kept, I paused at the doorway, only to hear a voice from inside. Mateo's voice, low and hoarse, carrying words I could not yet understand. Inside the hospital room, Mateo's voice broke the uneasy silence. "Mom, Dad, whatever happened, the fact that Isabella feels unsafe at home is because Camila is here. When she wakes up, she should not have to share the same roof. Camila needs to leave." His words hung heavy in the air, and not one person in that room rose to object. The silence cut deeper than his accusation. Outside the door, I stood frozen, waiting, hoping, but neither Antonio nor Lucia spoke up for me. I exhaled slowly, the sound almost like surrender, and turned to go, only to stop when Diego's voice erupted, raw and indignant. "That's not fair. If Isabella feels unsafe, then what about Camila? Has anyone here ever stopped to think why she insists on earning her own money even after coming back to this house? It's because she knows you are biased. She knows one day you might throw her out, so she prepares for survival." His tone sharpened as he turned to Mateo. "Brother, I know you resent her, maybe even hate her for what happened, but have you ever considered why she sleeps with a weapon hidden under her pillow? When our grandmother died, she had no one. She lived in a rusted container where a thug broke in one night. She fought back and he snapped her little finger, leaving it crooked forever. She was 13. 13, Mateo. Do you know what that does to a girl?" His words hit like stones in water, rippling outward until the whole room was drowning in the truth. Diego's eyes softened when he glanced at Isabella. "No matter what, you are still my sister. That won't change. But Camila is also my sister, and I will never abandon her. If you decide to drive her away, then I'll go with her." The room stilled. The weight of his vow pressed into every corner until he opened the door and stepped out, colliding with me standing rigid in the hallway. His eyes met mine, surprise flashing, then he gave a rueful smile. "So you heard everything." Later, in the corner of a quiet cafe near the hospital, Diego wrapped his hands around a cup of coffee, steam rising between us. I nodded silently, my throat too tight for words. He sighed, a sound steeped in years of disappointment. "Don't blame Mom or Mateo," he said softly. "You don't know everything. You weren't here when this family cracked apart." I leaned closer as he began to unravel the past. His voice was low, but carried a tremor that betrayed old wounds. "When Isabella and I were in middle school, Dad had an affair. The man who always pretended to be so rational, so steady, nearly abandoned everything for a younger woman. Mom and Dad grew up together, childhood sweethearts, tied to one another since they were kids. But when this happened, she nearly broke. The woman he was with had a child, a boy, and at the time Mateo was studying abroad. I was just a stupid kid acting out, throwing tantrums to prove I mattered when I was really powerless." He paused, his eyes fixed on the dark swirl of coffee. It was Isabella who stepped up. She stayed by Mom's side when she could barely hold herself together. She did everything she could to keep this family from burning to the ground. Our family was entangled in a major business deal with the Delgado family back then, to hold on to Dad. Isabella, charmed their matriarch, agreed to an arranged marriage with Adrian Delgado, and when she realized Mom planned to confront the mistress, she provoked the woman instead, took the hit herself. That woman rammed her car into Isabella, left her broken in a hospital bed for 3 months. But in the end, Dad cut ties and came home. I still remember her lying there drenched in blood, but clutching Mom's hand with a smile, whispering, "Don't worry, Dad will come back. No one will take what belongs to us." Before that, she was so timid, she couldn't even stand watching the cook gut a fish. And yet she bled for us. Diego's voice cracked thick with grief. That's why Mom and Mateo treat her the way they do. It's not that they mean to hurt you, Camila. It's that from that moment on, this family stopped being normal. They've been trying to repay a debt they can never name. I sat quietly, the bitterness in my chest colliding with something softer, something closer to understanding. At last, I understood why Diego sometimes envied the ease I had with friends outside this house, why Antonio always favored Mateo, why Lucia and Mateo favored Isabella. Diego was always left in the margins, the boy on the edges of his own family, pretending not to care, but seeing everything. I reached across the table, touched his shoulder gently. "It's enough, Diego. I understand. Don't worry about me. I'll handle it." But my heart was heavy, my mind already calculating the only way forward. Later that day, when Lucia slipped home to gather clothes for Isabella, I waited for her in the quiet living room. When she entered, her face softened into guilt, her eyes filled with apology. "I'm sorry, Camila. I can't abandon Isabella." Her voice trembled. "Let's set that aside for now," I interrupted, waving her toward the sofa, my resolve hardening with each breath. "There's something else I need to say. Mom, I think you and Dad should divorce." The words struck her like a blow. She froze, staring at me as if I had spoken madness. I leaned forward, voice low but relentless. "I know what happened when Isabella was in middle school. I know everything. And yes, I admit it, she loves you in a way that humbles me. She was willing to destroy herself to keep this family intact. If it had been me, I don't know if I could have done the same. But look at what that sacrifice has done to us. Look at what we've become. But Mom, you see it too, don't you?" From that moment on, she was broken, not on the surface but deep inside her mind. Lucia bit her lip, lowering her eyes into silence. I leaned forward, my voice steady, unwavering. "Have you ever heard of generational transmission, Mom? It is the way. Pain, beliefs, behaviors, even status get passed from parents to children, whether they want it or not. That is what is happening here." I locked my gaze with hers and continued. "What happened with Isabella this time is not only about her feelings for Adrian Delgado. It is about how she subconsciously mirrors the way you handled Dad's betrayal years ago. I told her everything Adrian had said and done at school, every manipulative word, every calculated move. Mom, it is not just about being blinded by love. Deep inside, she is reenacting your choices, and that is not normal." I took her hand, holding it firmly as though I could pass my conviction through touch. "I know divorce is not easy for you, but this is for the daughter you love most. If you do not want Isabella to repeat your mistakes, then you must learn to love yourself as fiercely as you have loved her. Do not let her live out the story you never wanted for her by keeping yourself trapped in the life that nearly destroyed you." Lucia's eyes glistened, her lips trembling, her voice fragile. "But what about you, Camila? What will become of you?" I smiled softly but with certainty. "As for me, I will follow the plan I always had. I will get into the best university in the country, use the Reyes name and connections as a foundation, start my own company, and build myself into someone untouchable. I will become my own fortress." Not long after Lucia made the choice, she initiated divorce proceedings with Antonio. At first, he refused, raging against the very idea. But when she presented him with certain documents and spoke with a calm finality he could not shake, he relented. On the day of their divorce, she transferred half of her shares in Reyes Construction to me, making me the child with the largest stake in the family empire. A month later, Isabella recovered enough to walk again. She sent word through Diego that she wanted to see me. When I arrived, she was sitting under a sycamore tree in the hospital garden. Sunlight spilled gently across her pale face, making her look ethereal, almost like a painting. When she saw me, she lifted her head. There was no hostility, no arrogance, just a quiet smile. Mom says once my leg heals, she will take me abroad. She will open her own design studio, and I will finally apply to the art school I always dreamed of. I will not have to marry for the family ever again. Even if I never marry at all, Mom says she will always stay with me, supporting me in everything I want to do. Her eyes shone with hope, her voice stripped of all the sharpness that once defined her. That is good, I nodded, taking a seat beside her. She returned the gesture with a small nod of her own, then added quietly, "And when that time comes, Mateo will come with us too. At home, it will just be you and Diego. He is a good brother, impulsive at times, but I believe you can guide him. Do not worry," I laughed. He already promised he would sit the university entrance exam with me. The study schedule I put together for him is enough to keep him buried in books day and night. Isabella chuckled lightly, the sound softer than I had ever heard it. After a pause, she whispered, "I am sorry." I sighed, not answering directly, letting the silence absorb her apology. "Do you remember I asked when you were in middle school and went to that dance competition? You lent your jacket and even sanitary pads to a girl competing in the science fair upstairs." She looked at me puzzled, and I pointed to myself. "That girl was me." Her eyes widened, startled, a breath of surprise escaping her lips. "That was you." I rose, sliding one hand into my pocket, lifting the other in a small wave. "Live well with Mom, Isabella. As for Adrian Delgado, he will be the first lesson in my empire." When the day came for Lucia and Isabella to leave, Antonio did not appear. Diego tried to excuse it, insisting it was because Mom would be hurt if she saw him, but to our surprise, she did not care at all. Before boarding the plane, she embraced me tightly, her lips brushing my ear as she whispered something I would never forget. Her words made me smile, and even as I left the airport, the smile lingered stubbornly. Diego, curious, kept asking what she had said. I looked at his earnest young face and decided not to tell him. There was no need for him to know that as part of the divorce settlement to secure our future in the Reyes household, Mom had demanded Antonio undergo a vasectomy. Some truths are too cruel, and Diego deserves at least a fragment of faith and love, a fragment of hope untouched by betrayal. Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next videos.